بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Continuing on with our Seerah series. Today we talk about a very important aspect coming into Al-Ahd al-Nabawi or Al-Ahd al-Madani, the time of the Medinan period. And before we talk about this today's topic, inshallah, and the events that took place, it's important that we understand the overall stages of life of Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam in Medina. And the ulama, they break them down into three stages. The first stage is the first 6 years, from the time of Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam's arrival in Medina until Dhul Qa'dah, in the year of the 6th year of Hijrah, when the Treaty of Hudaybiyah took place. This was a time of establishment, but it was also the most difficult period of Medina, in the time that they had to set up defense. They had to ensure that the nation is not taken down, because there were many threats externally and internally, as we're going to be discussing in the next few weeks, inshaAllah. So this was a stage, if you like, of resistance and defense, where they faced genocide, literally faced genocide, and how they dealt with it. Then we come to the second stage, after Sulh al-Hudaybiyah, from the 7th year of Hijrah to 8th year of Hijrah, 1 to 2 years. And this was the time that there was a peace treaty, there was no fighting. And it was a time of making da'wah, of going out and inviting all the different empires and rulers of the world to Islam. And then the final stage is after the Fath of Mecca, the expedition where they became victorious over Mecca. And these are the last 2 years of the life of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in which the da'wah is going strong and people are entering into Islam into folds. And this is why the seerah is so important, because it's telling us what to do at every single stage. When Islam is strong, when Islam is being attacked, when Islam becomes a nation, when people are entering into Islam, how to give da'wah. All of these things are covered within the seerah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and this shows you the importance, as we've talked about before. So talking about our topic today, inshallah, what is the first action that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who is now the head of the first Islamic state, the first ever Islamic state to be established, what is the first action that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam does? What is the first thing that he does? And I want to, barakallahu feek, Masjid, I want to quote Sheikh Ali al-Tantawi, rahimahullah. He says a beautiful quote. He says, An-Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam now, he has established the Islamic state for the first time. Imagine, the Sahaba coming from being oppressed, the people of Medina living in Jahiliyyah, and now for the first time they have an Islamic nation, and Rasulullah ﷺ is the head of this nation. What does a leader or ruler do, the first thing that he does? He says, does he make a mahrajan? Does he make like a big festival where he shows everybody that this is my mulk, this is my dominion, this is my empire, this is my kingdom? But Rasulullah ﷺ never wanted a kingdom. He had the opportunity in Mecca, he refused it. Did he build a military barracks and started to enlist people and say, yeah, we're going to everybody get ready to fight? But he never wanted just to be above and he didn't want expansionism. That wasn't his goal, just to take over the material world. So he didn't do that. Did he start to say, okay, guys, get together, I'm going to talk about how we're going to sort out the financial situation, we need to put taxes and this and that? He never did any of that. Rather, he started off by building the first step, to build the Masjid of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to show, just as the wahi started with iqra and ta'lim and learning and knowledge, so he starts off the Islamic state with the Masjid of Allah, a place of ibadah, the symbol of iman. And pay attention to these symbols. First, a symbol of iman, and then he sets up a place that is going to be a place of justice, where justice will be dispersed. So this is a symbol of adl, of justice. And then he sets up a place where knowledge will be learnt. So he sets up a school, a place of knowledge, the symbol of knowledge. And even the land, as we're going to get to inshaAllah, it was not taken by force. He could have easily said, this is the land and that's it. And the companions would be more than happy to give it to him. Yet he insisted that he purchase it to show you the rams of al-insaf, of being equal with everyone and treating them equally. And neither did he just command them to build the masjid, rather he also got involved in building the masjid to show you the symbol of humility of the leader. And the masjid itself was built, as we're going to see inshallah, in such a simple manner, wa alaykum assalam wa rahmatullah, in such a simple manner to show you the symbol of simplicity. And all of these together, the Shaykh mentions, they give you the sha'air of Islam, the symbols of Islam, all in this building of the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So look at the symbols behind building the masjid being the first thing that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam does as the head of the state in Al-Madinah. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, again in His hikmah, chooses, and Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, if you remember when we talked last week, دعوها فإنها مأمورة. The companions, the Ansar, they're saying, Ya Rasulullah, come to me, come to me. Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, leave the camel. She is being commanded by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So subhanAllah, nobody can dispute afterwards, because it's the camel that is resting at the place. It is not Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam choosing a place that people might say afterwards that he was favoriting or had favoritism, or he's choosing one over the other. No, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said it's the camel, wherever the camel sits, this is the place where the masjid will be. And then Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, as we mentioned briefly last week, and Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he finds out where the camel has set, it's in Banu Najjar, which happens to be the maternal family of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his maternal uncles. So he says to them, and the area that the camel resides in, by the way, is in a ha'it. Ha'it is like what you call enclosure, right? Where a place where you have walls around it. And in this ha'it, or in this enclosure, you have a mirbad, as we said. Mirbad is a place where they used to put the dates out, fresh dates, to make them dry and make them into dates. And there was also other things in there that we'll talk about inshallah. So Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he says to Banu Najjar, he says to the people who are there, and it's their land, that ثَامِنُونِي بِحَائِطِكُمْ هَذَا. Look at subhanallah. They're all wanting to give to Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, give me the price of this place. I want to know what the price is. And they said, لا والله لا نطلب ثمنه إلا إلى الله. We're not going to request any price, Ya Rasulullah, except from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Meaning, we give it to you for the sake of Allah. And then Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he's insistent, he wants to know, who does this land belong to? And then he finds out they belong to two orphans, Sahal and Suhail ibn Amr. Right? They're two orphans, and they're being looked after by their guardian, who is As'ad ibn Zurara, who we mentioned is the one who helped Mus'ab ibn Umair in the da'wah in the very first place. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he speaks to As'ad ibn Zurara, and in another narration he speaks directly with these orphans, and he says that I want to give you whatever whatever this is worth. Yep. And here subhanallah is a very important point here. وَلَا تَقْرَبُوا مَالَ الْيَتِيمِ إِلَّا بِالَّتِي هِيَ أَحْسَنُ حَتَّى يَبْلُغَ أَشُدَّهُ. That don't come near the wealth of the orphans except by that which is good until they reach maturity. What Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam did here, first of all, to show you the importance of the orphans. Secondly, the ulama, they do istidlal, they say this shows you the obligation of, when you're dealing with the wealth of the orphans, that you make sure that you deal with the guardian, the one who is entrusted with that. Yeah, not to just go and do things. And that's why they said, the ulama, they give rulings with this. They say the one who's not reached maturity, whether it be an orphan or not an orphan, if it comes to accepting gifts, then this is permissible. He can accept gifts if there's a benefit to him. If there's a direct benefit, it's permissible for him to accept it. However, it is not permissible for him to do something that may be harmful. Like, for example, him gifting something that technically belongs to him. Why? Because he doesn't know at that age, and he hasn't got the maturity of the mind. And thirdly, if this exchange is going to be, could be good, could be bad, meaning like buying or selling, this can only be done with the permission of the guardian. This is how the Sharia operates when it comes to not only orphans, but people who are under the age or not reached maturity yet. And this shows you the responsibility of the guardian in Islam, and how Islam protects the rights of the weak and those who are don't have a status in society. And Islam gives them that status rather. And so Rasulullah ﷺ, he purchases the land from these two orphan boys. And again, who does he go to? None other than his companion, none other than the greatest of this ummah, Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu ta'ala anhu, who buys it, by the way, for 10 dananir, 10 dinars, 10, the currency, just 10 pieces, right? And imagine him just purchasing that land becomes now the ajr of Masjid al-Nabawi is upon Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, subhanallah. Look at that. Purchasing the land of Masjid al-Nabawi. Abu Bakr as-Siddiq. This is again another great virtue of this great companion. May Allah be pleased with him. The state of the area that they had purchased, this enclosure, right? This enclosure, like we said, it was a mirbad. It was primarily a place where they used to put the dates out. But it was also a place that they had some of the graves of the mushrikeen. Of course, Ansar before Islam, what were they? They were upon shirk. So the people who had died in the area of the people of Banu Najjar, they had graves there that were graves of the mushrikeen. And there was also khirab. Khirab is like, tilled land, so that you can, have like land where you can grow things. And there was also palm trees on this land. So Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, in order to prepare the land for building the masjid, he orders for the graves. He is now the owner of the land. And Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam has purchased the land. So now he has freedom to do what he wants to do in the land. So he says for the graves to be exhumed. Yeah, the graves of the mushrikeen that were there, to remove the remains and take them elsewhere. Yeah, and here this shows the permissibility of the owner of the land. He can do as he pleases, as he sees fit, so long as he doesn't do anything that degrades the hurma of anybody, the sanctity of anybody. Yeah, so here this is a case of Banu Najjar. This is their people who died upon shirk from a long time ago. So there was no issue in exhuming these bodies and placing them elsewhere. Here also we learn that if this was a place, and this is an important point, if this was a place where there were graveyards, we know that the default position is you're not allowed to pray there. But once the reason has been removed, which is a very important qa'id in the deen, once the reason for that has been removed, the ruling is no longer there. Yeah. So now the graves no longer exist, therefore it is permissible to pray in that land. This is Masjid al-Nabawi is going to be built here. We no longer consider it a graveyard of the mushrikeen, because the illah has now gone. Yeah. And also the fact that they cut down the trees, palm trees, here to show you that if there is a need, then it is permissible for you to cut down those trees. So they cut down the trees, of course, to ensure that they can build the masjid. Now here we hear some, subhanallah, some of the beautiful events that took place in building this masjid. This masjid that is going to be the markaz, the center of the Islamic nation. First of all, Rasulullah ﷺ himself is carrying the mud bricks and carrying the stones to build the masjid himself. And he himself is doing anashid. And Nabi ﷺ is making anashid as he is doing this. And he says, هَذَا الْحِمَالُ لَا حِمَالَ خَيْبَرِي هَذَا أَبَرُّ رَبِّنَا وَأَطْهَرِي. That this carrying that we're doing, before the people of Medina and Khaybar, what were they known for? Carrying dates, carrying things that were beneficial. But Rasulullah ﷺ says, this is not the carrying of Khaybar. Like, we're not carrying dates and things like this. Rather, this is more beloved to Allah and more pure to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is carrying of stones that will build the masjid of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The one that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala في بيوت أذن الله أن ترفع. The one that Allah has permitted for you to build and for you to raise. And the Sahaba, what would they say? Allahumma inna al-ajra ajru al-akhirah farham al-ansara wal-muhajira. Yeah, that Allah, the real reward is the reward of the akhirah. So have mercy on Ansar and the Muhajirun. And one of the companions, when he saw Rasulullah working, he started to join in, and he said, لَإِنْ قَعَدْنَا وَالنَّبِيُّ يَعْمَلُ لَذَاكَ مِنَّا الْعَمَلُ الْمُضَلَّلُ. SubhanAllah, you can see the love already between and the brotherhood that is happening here. He said, if we are to sit down and Rasulullah is working, then this would be an act of deviance. Like, how could we sit and Rasulullah is working? Yeah. And another thing, another line of poetry that they would say, Allahumma la khayra illa khayrul akhirah fansur al-ansara wal-muhajira. Though Allah, there is no goodness except for the goodness of the akhirah, so help al-ansar and muhajira. And Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam would reply and repeat after them in these lines of poetry. And here this again shows you the permissibility of reciting anashid and what it does for the nafs. Yeah, when a person listens to an nasheed about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, about Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, how it uplifts the nafs. And as we're going to get into, inshallah, the ghazawat, the battles, how this was also an important part. It was an important role of tashji' al-nufus, yani to motivate the people to go and sacrifice for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So here again, the permissibility of doing these things and acknowledging the fact that this has an athar, it has an effect upon the heart. Yeah, look at the brotherhood that it brought them together, working together, singing the nasheed together, to show you how the hearts were in unison. Subhanallah. Another amazing thing that we see in the building of the masjid is a man by the name of Talq al-Yamami. Talq al-Yamami, he comes to join the Sahaba in building the masjid, and he says this report himself. He mentions this in an authentic narration. He said, I saw that Rasulullah was not too happy with the way that they were. You can see him, he's very specific, in how the building is going on. So he said, I could see that he was not too happy in the way that they were lacing the bricks. Yeah, like when you put the cement, if you like, between the bricks. And then he said, so I came and I took the misha, the spade, yeah, and I started to lace it properly because I know how to do it. So Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Ud'u al-Hanafi wat-tin." Leave. His nickname was al-Hanafi. He said, "Leave al-Hanafi and the cement that you're putting between the bricks. فَإِنَّهُ أَضْبَطُكُمْ لِلطِّينِ." Because he's the best person to do the cement. He knows how to do it. And here showing you pushing the right man for the right job. SubhanAllah, look, the companions, they were all eager to help. But Rasulullah is saying, no, you all might be eager, may Allah reward you. But this guy, he's the one who's the most skilled. Yeah? MashaAllah, it reminds me as well when we were renovating the masjid, we had brothers, MashaAllah, that were more skilled than others. Yeah? And so they were the ones that came forward. They were the ones that, may Allah reward them, doing the best at what they are good for doing, inshaAllah. Yeah? So everybody in their own majal, everybody in their own field, working to their best ability. And here Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam is saying it as it is to tell the companions that if this person has the right skill, push him forward, let him do this. Yeah? In another narration, فَإِنَّهُ أَحْسَنُكُمْ لَهُ مَسًّا وَأَشَدُّكُمْ مِنْ كَبًا. He told them, mashallah, is very strong. He's strong and he's also very precise in his work. So let him, crack on. Another thing that we notice is Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam allowing for them to work extra hard if they have the ability to do so. From them, Ammar ibn Yasir, yeah, if you remember his parents, the first martyrs of Islam. Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam is seeing the companions all carrying one mud brick at a time, and Ammar ibn Yasir is carrying 2 mud bricks at a time. And he was a rajulan dabitan, he was a man who was, mashallah, muscular and strong. So Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, as he's carrying the bricks, he's wiping the dust off Ammar's head, and he says, Ya Ammar, ala tahmilu ma yahmilu ashabuk. So Ammar, why don't you carry, the companions are carrying, just 1 brick at a time. And he says that I want more reward, Ya Rasulullah. And then look at how Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam addresses him. He says, Ibn Sumayya, the son of Sumayya, his mother, calls him by his mother's name, who is the first martyr in Islam. لِلنَّاسِ أَجْرٌ وَلَكَ أَجْرًا. For the people is 1 reward and for you is double the reward. And then he says to him something which is from the Dala'il al-Nubuwah, from the signs of his prophethood alayhi salatu salam. He says, وَآخِرُ زَادِكْ شُرْبَةٌ مِّن لَبَنٍ وَتَقْتُلُكَ الْفِئَةُ الْبَاغِيَةُ. He said, your last thing that you will have in this earth is a drink of milk, and the group that is aggressive is the one that is going to kill you. And this happens many years after the life of Rasulullah, where Ammar ibn Yasir was killed in the fitna that happened between some of the companions. And here to show you that according to this is why the scholars say that Ali ibn Abi Talib was the more right of the two, but they are both, we love both groups, and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive them for their shortcomings between themselves. So here again, subhanallah, we can see the brotherhood already with the Sahaba, and we're going to get into that next week, inshallah, the brotherhood. But here, subhanallah, already building the masjid, you can see that how the community gets together, walillahi alhamd. How long did it take to build the masjid? It took roughly around 12 days to build the masjid of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And what kind of masjid are we talking about? From one of the most simplistic masajid that you will see. A masjid so simple in its nature. Yeah. You ask about the flooring of the masjid. the flooring was sand and little stones. This was the flooring of the Masjid of Rasulullah. In an extent that when it used to rain, they used to pray on the sand that is wet sand. They used to come onto the parts of their body that are making sujood and so on. Yeah. As for the pillars of this masjid, the pillars were the trunks of the palm trees that were there. And as for the roof, parts of the roof were covered by the small branches of the palm trees when you put them together to make the roof. And it was approximately 100 cubits, or mi'at dhira', which is about 50 meters, if you like. 50 meters both length and width. So this was the Masjid of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the first ever markaz, and we can see the simplicity of it. One of the scholars, he mentioned something, he goes, you can just imagine, and he brings the hadith together, and he talks about, he puts this, like, it gets you to imagine. Like, imagine this place that you would come, sometimes it would rain, the roof had leaks, and you'd find the floor is wet, and yet the Sahaba are praying. A place that perhaps you'd come in, and because of how the way the masjid was, you would find stray dogs coming in and out, and yet the Sahaba would be there. This is their masjid. Yeah, the door frame, subhanallah. Yeah, from the stones that they used just to build the door of the masjid, or the gateway of the masjid. So here, subhanallah, the simplicity of the masjid, and yet its importance. And this shows you here a very important lesson, my brothers and sisters, that it is not important the materialistic aspect of it. The emphasis was given on what the symbolism behind this. That what are we building here? We're building the masjid. We're building the place of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is going to be our center. This is as we're going to get into, the purpose of this masjid. That is what it is for. So let's have a look, inshallah. I've got a little image here. I think on those of you that are on Menti, you can also look into the image on your phone, inshallah. So here you have, obviously this is now the Qibla facing Mecca, but if you imagine, the Qibla is facing the other way, right? The Qibla is facing the other way. And Rasulullah ﷺ has built this, him and his companions have built this masjid, roughly, like we said, 50 meters by 50 meters. And you can see some of the masjid, not all of the masjid, some of it is protected by the roof made of the palm tree branches, and you have the pillars of the palm trees to support the roof of the masjid. And then of course Rasulullah ﷺ, he has his houses that are built around the masjid, his apartments, if you like, that are built around the masjid. And this is only done after he completes the masjid. So look at this. The Nabi ﷺ, he puts forward building the masjid before his own house. If you remember last week, we said he's staying with which companion? Who remembers? Which companion did Rasulullah stay with whilst this was happening? Ahsan tabarakallah fik. Abu Ayyub al-Ansari, yeah, stayed at his house. Now after the house, the masjid is complete, how long did it take to complete the masjid? 12 days, barakallahu fikum. 12 days, now he builds 2 houses. Each one for each wife. He's married to Sauda, radiallahu ta'ala anha, and Aisha, radiallahu ta'ala anha. So he builds 2 apartments, if you like, near the masjid. And they are upon the wall of the masjid. This tells you again, when you're looking for a house, this is what you look for in a house. How close is it to the masjid? That should be your priority. How close is it to the place that Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam said is or showed us that is the first place that we should be looking. This is what it meant to the Sahaba. And that's why it became, up until today, Markaz al-Madinah, the center of Medina. Before, Medina was not, didn't have a center point, if you like. There was duar, there were different areas in Medina. But this masjid made it centralized. And the Sahaba, we'll get to inshallah, like what happened. And we said, Abu Bakr bought it for 10 dananir. What happens now to the land? How it gets more expensive. Why? Because it's close to Masjid Rasul. Yeah? So they built the houses around the masjid. And the masajid were very, Imam Bukhari mentions in Adab al-Mufrad, one of the, I think is one of the tabi'i who goes into the houses that were still at the time. And he tells you how it is. He says, these houses, they were made of the branches of the palm tree branches. The walls were made of palm tree branches. Yeah? and they were also made of mud brick. And he says, as for the cover of the houses, the roof of the houses, it was mainly the animal hide, or the hair of the animal, the hide of the animal, sorry. This was the cover of the roofs of the houses of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his houses. And the door was so you have the door of the hujra, and I'll show you in the next picture, inshallah. In fact, I'll show you now. It'll be easier for you to see. So here, if you look on your screen, inshallah, or if you look on the screen here, the house, if you like, it has two compartments. You have the hujra, yeah, as we know, Surah Al-Hujurat. The hujra is the reception area of the house, if you like. Yeah, when you come inside to the house, you come into the hujra. This hujra, by the way, shows you Rasulullah, he's the head of the state, the leader of the Muslims, and his hujra, his reception, the area where he allows people to come and visit him, it has no door. It has a wool curtain. This is an opaque wool curtain. This is the living room area of the house of Rasulullah. The wall of this area is from palm tree branches. Yeah, the living quarters of this area. Yeah, and this is an example of our mother Aisha radiallahu ta'ala and her house. And you can see this living room. How big is it? Something that we can relate to. About 3 meters across and 5 meters. Yeah, so like a big living room. Not even a big living room. Subhanallah, people have now living rooms much bigger than this. This is like your average size living room. And Rasulullah, this is his living room. And this, by the way, is where Rasulullah passes away, in this very same place, the Hujrat of Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha. Now, obviously, this is the area where in Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when you come to the hadith where he places his head inside from the masjid. So if you can see here, Masjid al-Nabawi is on this side, and the wool curtain is on the other side. So Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam is doing i'tikaf, and he places his head through the wool curtain, and Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha is combing his hair. Yeah, so show you Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam how close he was to the masjid. And then you have, of course, the privacy that is needed for the wives of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They would have what we call the bayt. Today we think bayt and we think house. Bayt for them was the private living quarters that they would stay in, right? The place where this needs to be private. So if you can see here, the actual bayt, the actual house, it is built from mud bricks, yeah, rather than palm tree branches. And the door of this house is not a curtain, because this needs more privacy. It's made from saj. Saj was actually a wood that they would bring from India. This a type of wood that they would bring from India. This was the house, the door of the house of Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha, right? And of course, again, there was a roof. If you notice, the living quarters, there is no roof. There's no roof. But the private area of Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha, her bayt, it has palm tree branches as the roof, right? And here it says that the ceiling is less than 2 meters. However, it's slightly longer than this, because there's an authentic narration of Al-Hasan al-Basri, the great tabi'i. He said, I went into the houses of Rasulullah and I would be able to touch the roof with my hand. But Al-Hasan al-Basri, he was somebody who was known to be a large man. He was a very big man. Yeah. And if you look at some of the other narrations of the height, they say that it was roughly 7 to 8 cubits, which is about 3 meters. Yeah, so it's not very low ceiling. It's about 3 meters. But if you think Al-Hasan al-Basri, what he's saying shows you that they actually used to have higher ceilings than that. Yeah, they had higher ceilings than 3 meters. MashaAllah, they had very high ceilings. But this one was maybe about 2.5 meters to 3 meters, because Al-Hasan al-Basri says, I could touch the ceiling with my hand. Yeah. So the point being is, this was the houses of the best of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's creation, the leader of the Muslimin, and this was the houses that he had, alayhi salatu wassalam. Naam. Move on to inshallah. So after the masjid was built, the companions, they started to talk amongst themselves, and they used to say that how is it that we can come to the salah? At the moment, what were we doing? فَيَتَحَيَّنُونَ. يَتَحَيَّنُونَ means what we do today. They would give like a approximation that, okay, now there's time for salah, and they would make their way to the masjid. There was no way of letting them know that the masjid, the time for salah has started. So they started discussing amongst themselves that what should they do. Some of them said that why don't we take the naqus, the bell, like the Nasara, they have like the drum, sorry, they had a drum, like they would beat a wooden thing with like a wooden stick, and this would make the noise so that they can hear that it's the call to prayer. So some of them said, why don't we take this drum? And others said, no, why don't we take the trumpet of the Jews? They used to blow a trumpet in order to call the people to their prayer. And some of them said, why don't we raise a flag, and whoever sees the flag starts telling everybody else that it's time for salah. And as they are discussing this, Abdullah ibn Zayd, one of the companions, one of the Ansari companions, he says, I was sleeping one day, and as I'm sleeping, an angel or a being comes down to me, and this being has two green cloths on him, and in his hand is a naqus, this wooden drum that the Nasara would use. So he says to Abdullah, this angel or this creature that's come to him in his dream, are you going to sell this this naqus, this drum? And he said, yes. What are you going to do with it? He said, I'm going to call the people to salah. So he's in his dream, he was thinking about the salah as well. How can I call the people to salah? So this being says to Abdullah in his dream, should I not tell you something that is better than this? And he says, yes. So he says, say Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, Ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah, Ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah, Hayya ala salah, Hayya ala salah, Hayya ala al-falah, Hayya ala al-falah, Allahu Akbar, La ilaha illallah. And then he says, and when the people have gathered, he's telling him in the dream, when the people are starting to gather and the salah is about to commence, then say Allahu Akbar, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, Ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah, Hayya ala salati, Hayya ala al-falah, Qad qamat as-salatu, Qad qamat as-salah, Allahu Akbar, La ilaha illallah. So he says, I wake up from this dream and I immediately go to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and I tell him what happens in the dream. And Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, this is a dream of truth. And he says, go now to Bilal ibn Rabah and tell him what you said. Tell him to call the people with this. And here again, when we said right man for the right job, why does the Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam say Abdullah ibn Zayd is the one who has the dream? He's the one who Allah honored by having such a dream. He says, فَلْيُؤَذِّن Bilal. Let Bilal be the one who call. فَإِنَّهُ أَنْدَى صَوْتًا مِنْكَ. Yeah, and look at again the tawadu of the Sahaba as well, how accepting they are of Rasulullah. That Bilal has a better voice than you, more louder voice and more beautiful voice. So let Bilal do the adhan. And Abdullah ibn Zayd immediately complied. SubhanAllah, if this was unfortunately one of us today, I'm the one that had the dream, why am I being, the one that is undermined and this and that? No. And Rasulullah, he knows everybody who's best for the job. Go tell Bilal ibn Rabah, he is the one. So he goes to Bilal ibn Rabah and he teaches him what he heard. Bilal ibn Rabah begins to call this adhan for the first time ever in Medina, for the first time ever for the Muslims to hear such a thing. And Umar ibn al-Khattab, when he hears this adhan and he's in his house, he runs out so excited, he's dragging his upper garment, he's still not wearing his clothes properly, and he says to Rasulullah that by the one who sent you with the truth, Ya Rasulullah, I saw a dream just like this. And Rasulullah replied, فَلِلَّهِ الْحَمْدِ, and all praise to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So who were the callers of Rasulullah? Who were the mu'adhin at the time of Rasulullah? Primarily Bilal ibn Rabah, he was the main caller, and you also had Abdullah ibn Maktoum. Abdullah ibn Maktoum, who was a blind companion of Rasulullah from the Muhajirun. And Nabi also had other mu'adhins, but they were not in the Masjid al-Nabawi. One of them was in Masjid Quba, Sa'ad al-Qarad, and the other one was in Mecca, Abu Mahdura. Yeah, and there's an interesting story that I will relate to you, inshallah, of one of the companions, the one who became the mu'adhin of Mecca. Yeah, subhanallah. And he says that we were coming back from jihad in the Battle of Hunain, and Rasulullah we were returning to al-Madinah, and Nabi sallallahu called Bilal and said, make the adhan. So Bilal radiallahu anhu, he makes the adhan, and he said, we were listening to the adhan. Wallah, sometimes I think of the shabab when we hear this narration. He said, as we were listening to the adhan, we each started to mimic the adhan, like we're copying the adhan. And then Rasulullah he comes to us and he says, who was the one who had that loud voice? He heard them, trying to copy the adhan. He said, who was the one that had the loud voice? So this companion, he says, I'm the one that had the loud voice. So Rasulullah says, قُمْ فَأَذِّن بِالصَّلَاةِ. Like, now you come and do the adhan. And then he said to Rasulullah, let me do the adhan in Mecca. Let me be the mu'adhin of Mecca. And Nabi said, I've commanded you and put you for that post, for you to be the mu'adhin of Mecca. And subhanAllah, here this is the, it shows the makana, or the status of the mu'adhin in Islam. He has a great status in Islam, the mu'adhin. And some of the, just to mention a few things here, inshallah, that here we can see that it is important that the mu'adhin has a loud voice. And some of the virtues of the mu'adhin, as Rasul said in authentic hadith in Sahih Muslim, al-mu'adhinuna atwalu an-nasi a'naqan yawm al-qiyamah, that the mu'adhin will have the longest neck on yawm al-qiyamah. And the ulama, they said, either he has a long neck, meaning he is the one who he has more hope for the mercy of Allah, because when you have a long neck, it's something that you use to try to look over. So they are looking over for the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And others said that no, this means that his neck is long. When the people are drowned in their sweat, he is far away from this. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. And Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said as well in Bukhari and Muslim, لو يعلم الناس ما في النداء والصف الأول. If the people knew what was in the virtue of the adhan and in the front صف, ثم لم يجدوا إلا أن يستهموا عليه لاستهموا عليه. And if they could not do any way other than to draw lots to decide who's going to do the adhan and be in the first صف, they would do that. And he also said, المؤذن يغفر له مدى صوته. It's important to have having that, mashallah, loud voice, that he is forgiven for as long as his voice travels. So you can imagine those people in the Bilad Muslimin, where their voices are going out into the streets, as long as his voice is traveling, he is being forgiven for his sins. وَيَشْهَدُ لَهُ كُلُّ رَطْبٍ وَيَابِسٍ. And every dry and every live and non-living matter attests to this. Every stone, every tree, every human, every animal attests to this on Yawm al-Qiyamah of this mu'adhin. This shows you, wallahi, the amazing virtues of the mu'adhin. Another hadith, Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, al-imamu dhamin wal-mu'adhinu mu'taman. That the imam, he is like the protection. Why? Because his salah is protecting the salah of the people, right? And the mu'adhin is mu'taman. Yeah, he's the one that the people trust in him. And they say, why is it that they trust in him? Because he needs to know what time the salah is. If he calls the adhan, people's siyam is based on this adhan, right? He's calling the adhan for fajr, I know that I need to stop my fast now. He's calling the adhan for maghrib, I need to know to break my fast. Also they say mu'taman because when they used to climb up on the high tops of the masjid, they could be able to see the houses of the people. So it had to be somebody who was trustworthy. So Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam made a dua, فَأَرْشَدَ اللَّهُ الْأَئِمَّةِ. So may Allah guide the imams, وَغَفَرَ لِلْمُؤَذِّنِينَ. And may Allah forgive every mu'adhin. Naam. So inshallah we'll move on. But before I move on, I have to say something about, subhanallah, la ilaha illallah. Naam, the symbol of adhan according to the Sahaba. Yani the Sahaba, and when they were with Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when in some of the, when Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam was dealing internally with those people who had not accepted Islam, towards the end, and Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam would go at Fajr time, and he would go just before Fajr, and he would wait. What is he waiting for? To see if the people of that village call the adhan. If they call the adhan, then there's no fight, there's no conflict. But if there's no adhan, that means that we go and we fight them. So shows you here that the adhan for them was the biggest symbol of the Islam of the people. And that is why the fuqaha, they say, if the Muslim community were to collectively, this is talking about under the Sharia, under the Islamic law and the Islamic country, before they take this snippet out. Under the Sharia, if the Muslim community in that area refused to do the adhan, the imam should fight them over it. Subhanallah. This is how it's not something to be taken lightly. If the people collectively, let's say they're praying the salah, but they're not doing the adhan, they're refusing to make public this symbol of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they should be fought over it until they do the adhan, to show you the importance of the adhan in Islam. The next thing that I wanted to mention was the mimbar of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, before he would, we said the simplicity of the masjid. So what he would do is he would lean upon one of the palm trees that they cut off to give the khutbah, right? And then after the battle of Khaybar, I think it was, one of the Ansari women, and here again to show you, subhanAllah, you know when they say that the women have no voice, this is an Ansari woman speaking in the presence of these companions. She says, Ya Rasulullah, if only we could make you a mimbar, because sometimes we can't see you. You're on the same level as us, we can't see you. And again, look at the tawadu of Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We said about this, and Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he was sitting with his companions, somebody who's a stranger would come in and say, Ayyukum Muhammad, which one of you is Muhammad? Imagine, you couldn't distinguish him from his companions the way he's sitting with them. That they have to ask which one of you is Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He didn't have no high seat or throne, alayhi salatu wasalam. And look at this, the Sahaba, they are saying, should we not build you a mimbar? And the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam feel entitled and say, yes, I should deserve a mimbar, make me one made of gold or something. He said, in shi'tum, if you want to do so, up to you. Look at the tawadu of Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, an Ansari woman, a woman from the Ansar, making the suggestion, if you want to do, go ahead. And so they build the masjid of Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, build the mimbar of Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the pulpit. And as Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam goes upon the pulpit, this, Allahu Akbar, this palm tree trunk that was once used as the pulpit of Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the Sahaba say, we hear siyah, we hear like a shriek, a crying of a boy, or as a crying of the she camel that has just given birth, how it calls out to its child. We heard this cry in the masjid, echoing in the masjid, and we see it coming from this palm tree trunk. And Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam comes and he places his blessed hand upon this palm tree trunk, and he said to the companions that had I not made this palm tree trunk feel at ease, subhanallah, it would have been crying until Yawm al-Qiyamah. It would have been continuing till Yawm al-Qiyamah. And Al-Hasan al-Basri, who narrates this hadith of Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, said, if had I not calmed it down, it would have never stopped until the Day of Judgment. He cries, Al-Hasan al-Basri narrating this narration, and then he tells his companions, Ya ibadallah, al-khashabatu tahinnu ila rasulillah, shawqan ilayhi limakanati min Allah, فأنتم أحق أن تشتاقوا إلى لقائه عليه الصلاة والسلام. He said, O slaves of Allah, the wood, the non-living inanimate object, cries out of yearning for Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and you as humans, you as flesh and life, you should be more in yearning and shawq and want and desire to meet Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And again, this shows you the pragmatic nature of the Sharia, that subhanallah, the Sahaba, they can't see Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So these things, if they are done, this is why the ulama, they said, like for example, the bending of the minara, the minaret, if it is done so that the person can do the adhan, for example, using the mic, these are all from the pragmaticness of the Sharia. Yeah. Before they used to put these alcoves such as the dome and the mihrab and so on, so that the voice can echo around the masjid. So these are all things that have an asl in the Sharia. They have you can find the asl in the Sharia of pragmatism. Yeah. From how Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam allowed for the mimbar to be built. And this mimbar, it has a virtue in of itself. Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, قوائم منبري رواتب في الجنة. That the stands of my mimbar, you will find them as pillars in Jannah. Yeah, subhanallah. And also the famous hadith that you see when you go to Al-Rawda, the original masjid of Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, it'll say the hadith there that whatever is ما بين بيتي ومنبري روضة من رياض الجنة. That whatever is between my mimbar, my pulpit, and my house, it is a garden from the gardens of Jannah. And he also said, وَمِنْبَرِي عَلَى حَوْضِي. And when you come to the pond of Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam of Kawthar, and we drink from his blessed hands, alayhi salatu wasalam, we will find that this is where he'll be on his mimbar also. Subhanallah. Now, moving on, inshallah, I want to briefly touch on the expansion or the extension of the masjid. So at the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we said it was, anybody remember roughly how long? about 50 meters. Yeah, 50 meters in width and around 50 meters in length as well. After the Battle of Khaybar, obviously there was a lot of more people accepting Islam. So Rasulullah ﷺ, he said, like, the masjid has now become tight for us. And there were houses and land that belonged to the Sahaba. And subhanAllah, look at this again. Rasulullah ﷺ did not impose on any of those companions their amwal, their wealth. He could have said, give up your houses for the sake of Allah. And they would have happily done so. Or he could have done as many of the rulers of today. This is of the benefit of the country. We're going to take away your houses. But what did Rasulullah ﷺ say? Which of you is going to purchase the land for us? And Uthman ibn Affan is the one who stood up. He stood up and he purchased the land, not for 10 dinar, a few years ago, like Abu Bakr bought for. Now, this land has become expensive. This is around the house of Rasulullah ﷺ. And here shows you that how the Muslim community was slowly beginning to thrive. That this land was now, how much did Uthman ibn Affan purchase it for? 20 to 25,000. 20 to 25,000. The area and the land to extend the masjid. And subhanAllah is a beautiful narration when they were trying to climb the walls and the houses around the masjid in the fitna of Uthman ibn Affan when he was assassinated, may Allah be pleased with him. When he was assassinated by the people who came out against the rebellious people. And Uthman ibn Affan was saying to those around him that, do you remember, Allahu Akbar, imagine this. Do you remember when Rasulullah ﷺ said, who is going to purchase the land of these people or this person, and with this purchase he will buy Al-Jannah. And it was me. Do you remember? Uthman ibn Affan tells the people around him, do you remember that it was me who purchased it from my own wealth? Sulb mali, I purchased it with my own wealth for a place in Al-Jannah. So at the time of Rasulullah ﷺ, this was the extension that took place. And I don't know the exact measurements, Allahu A'lam, but it was extended a lot more further. At the time of Abu Bakr when he was the Khalifa, there was no extension. At the time of Umar ibn al-Khattab, further extension was needed. So he built it like keeping the same design of Rasulullah ﷺ, which was the simple mud bricks and the palm tree branches. But this time, instead of having the palm tree trunks as the pillars, he used actual wood. That's the only change that Umar al-Khattab did. He tried to keep the original design of the masjid, if you like. Yeah. And Umar al-Khattab was very cautious. He said, don't distract the people. Make sure you don't put any painting or anything like this in the masjid to distract the people. And he said, أَكِنَّ النَّاسَ مِنَ الْمَطَرِ. His main concern, protect the people from the rain. Make sure you get rid of this problem of the roof leaks and all this. وَإِيَّاكَ أَن تُحَمِّرْ أَوْ تُصَفِّرْ. But don't beware of painting the masjid in bright colors. فَتَفْتِنَ النَّاسِ, that the people become distracted in their salah. After Umar ibn Khattab, who becomes the Khalifa, Uthman ibn Affan, and he extends it much more further to what we know as the original masjid of Uthman ibn Affan. When you go to the masjid, just after the umbrellas, this area here is the masjid of Uthman ibn Affan. And if you compare that to Al-Rawda al-Sharifah, you can see expansion of Uthman ibn Affan. So Uthman ibn Affan, he extends all of this, and what does he do? He's the first one to give it a complete renovation. Yeah. So rather than having the old walls that were made, again shows you the pragmaticness of the Sharia. Yeah. Rather than having the old walls that were made of like a mud brick and this cement, he builds it from engraved stones. So again, it shows you as well that the Muslims now have the capacity. So there's nothing wrong with doing this if you have the ability to do so. So he made it out of the engraved stones, and he also made it from qassa. Qassa is what we know, what they call in English, gypsum. What's it called? Those are in building. Gypsum, yeah? So like the plastering basically. So they actually had plastered walls with these engraved stones. So you can see that there was some sort of decoration to the masjid, albeit simple. And this, none of the Sahaba, by the way, it's not reported that any of them rebuked Uthman ibn Affan for doing this. So it is permissible for have some sort of decoration, simplistic decoration, not something that will cause the distraction of the people. And all the companions, they agreed with this. And he also changed the roof of the masjid to saj. Yeah, it's no longer the palm tree branches. This time saj, which is, remember, wood from where? that they would bring from India. Yeah. So this is the extension of Uthman ibn Affan. May Allah be pleased with him. Inshallah, because of the time, I will skip through the virtues of Masjid al-Nabawi, but we know that in Nabi said that the salah in Masjid al-Haram, 100,000. Salah in the Masjid al-Nabi is 1,000. And in Masjid al-Aqsa, according to two narrations, 1,500. The other one, 250. Wallahu a'lam. This is what I really want to focus on, ikhwan, is the purpose of the masjid. Something that is so misunderstood today, subhanallah. What is the purpose of the masjid in Islam? What did Rasulullah ﷺ build this masjid for? Was it simply, just because we need a place to pray? Although that is the most important thing, no doubt, it was not the sole purpose of it. But subhanallah, on this point, I want to show you something I want to point out to something very important. The Sahaba and Rasulullah ﷺ, the first thing that they felt gets them together is the salah. This is what unites us together, the salah. This is what brings the nation together. This is what the nation is built upon our purpose, which is to connect with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to pray the salah. This was their salah, the connection to Allah as individuals and as a community. And that's why, what did the companions, كان أصحاب النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم لا يرون من الأعمال تركها كان لا يرون الكفر في ترك الأعمال في غير الصلاة. Or كما قال, as the report goes, that the Sahaba, they would not see anything, if you leave off anything, as kufr except for salah. Leave off all these different things, they would not say it was kufr except for the one who leaves off the salah. This is what the salah meant to them. For them, imagine, in their lifetime, they saw Rasulullah build this masjid, which the primary purpose of it is, and the most things that are happening in the masjid is the salah. So how can somebody leave this off? You leave this off. Never mind the salah itself. Imagine how we said the adhan itself. They would go to the different qura, to the different villages. If they don't hear the adhan being established, this to them is a red flag. So here shows you the importance of the masjid as a place of salah. But it was also a place of other things. It was a place for Ahl al-Sufa. The Ahl al-Sufa, remember that when we looked at the masjid, there were certain parts of the masjid that had a roof, that had a covering. Yeah? And there were very poor and needy Muslims. The likes of Abu Hurairah, who's muhajir to Medina. Him and his likes that were poor, and they never had homes. They were homeless companions. They were homed in the house of Rasul of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in Masjid al-Nabawi. This was the purpose of the masjid, to be a place of asylum, to be a home to the poor and the needy. And don't think that it was only men. There was also women who are homeless. They would come to the masjid, they would set up their tents in the masjid. Could you imagine, subhanallah, if we did this today in the masajid? And of course there needs to be facilitation for these things, no doubt, and there's regulations and so on. But it shows you what the masjid meant to them, what it was to them, what kind of place this was. Subhanallah, today a little thing happens with the shabab. What are they doing? Yes, the masjid has its sanctity, but look at what was happening in the masjid. Also, it was a school, it was a madrasa, it was an educational institute. Rasulullah taught them, and after Rasulullah Khulafa al-Rashideen, and after them the A'imma of Islam taught in the masjid of Rasulullah up until today, a place of education. And I put here media outlet. The reason why I say that is because the media at the time of Rasulullah, it was to say poetry. It was to give lines of poetry that would go and people would carry on and they would report these lines of poetry. And how many times Rasulullah's honor was defended, and the honor of Islam was defended by poetry that was said and done in the masjid of Rasulullah. Somebody asked me the other time when we had the program, when we had one of the munshideen, he came and he did an anashid about Rasulullah and so on, and said, is this befitting of the masjid? Subhanallah, Hassan ibn Thabit, the poet of Rasulullah, he was doing poetry in the masjid, and Umar ibn Khattab, he came in and he gave him a bit of a look. He said, I used to recite poetry in the masjid, and the one who is better than you would tell me to do it, meaning Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Yeah. So again, this is a place that, never mind, whilst they're building the masjid, they are doing inshad to lift up the morale of the Muslims. It was also a courtroom. How many times Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam dealt with issues, performed ankiha, separated between those that had the marital issues and so on. Again, a courtroom. Sometimes even a place where they would bring the prisoner, as we're going to come to inshallah. One of the prisoners of the leaders of the mushrikeen, he was imprisoned in the masjid, one of the pillars, right? And subhanallah, it was a means of him accepting Islam. So again, look where the masjid is being used for. It was also used as a hospital when the Muslims were being attacked in Al-Khandaq, in the battle of the Ahzab, as we'll come to inshallah. They set up tents inside the masjid to look after those people who had been injured in the war. It was also a political place where they would receive ambassadors. Yeah, they would receive people that had come. And Nabi, where would you find him? You wouldn't find him in no palace. You would find him in Masjid of Rasulullah, Masjid al-Nabawi. This is where they would come and they would bring, the leaders that had come to visit Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It was also the military outpost when the Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam would send out armies to go and to fight in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He would call them out in the masjid. He would call them to the masjid to declare that they are going to fight. It was also a place where the leader and the people would meet. Allahu Akbar. Look at this, the importance of the relationship of the leader and his people. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, minimum times he's seeing his companions is 5 times every single day. 5 times a day, yahtak, he's getting close to his companions, whether they be poor or rich, whether they be slave or whether they be free people, whether they be of a high tribe or a low tribe. And Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam is mixing with every single one of them. At least 5 times a day they are seeing him, and he is the leader of the nation. And subhanallah, how it also became the place of brotherhood. And this is something that we all attest to, walillahi alhamd. How you come to this masjid 5 times a day and you stand shoulder to shoulder with your brothers, with no gaps in between you, praying to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at least 5 times a day. This is how Allah puts ta'leef. This is how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brings our hearts together. No other way. لو أنفقت ما في الأرض جميعا ما ألفت بين قلوبهم. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says to Rasulullah, if you're to pay all the money in the world, أنت يا رسول الله, the most purest of people with the most purest of intentions, if you're to use all the wealth of the world, you wouldn't be able to bring the hearts together. ولكن الله ألف بينهم. But it is Allah who brings the hearts together. And this is how He brings the hearts together. When we stand together before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and we pray in the saf that Allah Jalla wa Ala loves. There's more. Subhanallah, think about our actual salah, my brothers. And we get to this inshallah next week when we talk about how Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam paired Muhajirin and Ansar. In the salah, we don't say ihdini as-sirat al-mustaqim. When you're praying Surah Al-Fatiha, you don't say, oh Allah, guide me. You say ihdina. You're saying us, meaning you and your brother who's right and left of you. When you're in tahiyyat, you don't say assalamu alayya wa ala ibadillah as-salihin. You don't say peace be upon me and upon all the slaves of Allah. Assalamu alayna. Who is alayna? Every brother that you have on your right and the left of you. And when you end your salah, assalamu alaykum wa rahmatullah to the people on your right, assalamu alaykum wa rahmatullah to the people on your left. This is the beauty of Islam. This is the brotherhood of Islam. That unfortunately, wallahi, we've lost the sense of in many of our masajid. Wallahu al-musta'an. Wallahi, this is what the essence of the masjid was at the time of Rasulullah. That is why he started off the Islamic state by building the masjid. And that was the core that we'll get to inshaAllah. Al-mu'akha. How Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he partnered, not only partnered mu'akha from the word akh, from ukhuwa. He made them brothers, muhajirin and ansar. And we'll talk about that in the next week, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. Wa sallallahu ala nabina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. We'll just have a look at the questions inshallah. Sorry, I missed the first part. Is the masjid you are talking about, the masjid that is now is called, Naam, yeah, we're talking about Al-Masjid al-Nabawi. Al-Masjid al-Nabawi, this is the masjid that we're talking about. By the way, this is the difference with the ulama. We talked about last week, Masjid Quba, المسجد أسس على التقوى من أول يوم. The masjid that was built upon taqwa from the very first day. The ulama, they have a difference in opinion as to whether this is Masjid Quba or Masjid al-Nabawi. And both have arguments for this. Wallahu alam, Masjid Quba or Masjid al-Nabawi. And here there's a side note, subhanAllah, some of the ulama, they mentioned that perhaps this is not like a dalil, but rather something that, we say yasta'nis bih, like something that is nice to hear. The fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, min awwali yawm, that this was the masjid that was built from the first day. This is perhaps the thing that the Sahaba, they decided, when they decided to make the Islamic calendar, awwal yawm was from Medina, from Hijrat and Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And this is not like a dalil, but just شيء يعني يستأنس به. نعم, inshallah, all the talks will be uploaded onto YouTube, inshallah. There's a series called the Seerah series, or the series of the seal of the Prophet ﷺ. You can find all that on there, inshallah. Practical examples of establishing the rights of the masjid in a secular country of the... Wallahi, this is very important. This is very important. The masjid, it needs to be, as it is, wallahi, I see this masjid, and one of the reasons that brought me to this masjid from coming from Birmingham to Leeds for the first time in my life, was one of the practical issues here that we have, or matters here that we have, walillahi alhamd, the unity of the masjid. That I honestly came to this masjid not knowing who's the idara, who are they. Shaykh Abu Isam, Allah preserve him, he invited me over. I didn't know, was this masjid to the Caribbean, Jamaican community? Is this masjid for the Pakistani community? Is this masjid, I come from Birmingham as well, we have this. But subhanallah, this masjid, alhamdulillah, we have brothers from all over, resembling what the masjid should be. We're resembling that the masjid should be a place where every Muslim meets, irrespective of where he comes from. And now in terms of practical examples of establishing the masajid in these secular countries, I mean, that question is quite in depth. Inshallah, we can maybe talk about it another time, but I do feel it's a very important question. How we set up the masajid, how the shura should be formed, how we should ensure that it's fulfilling the rights of the Muslims when it comes to education, when it comes to the rituals, for example, funeral rites and ankiha, doing nikah and arbitration and mediation and all these things, and da'wah and community work, everything. The masjid should be that beacon, and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make this masjid one of those beacons, bi'idhnillah ta'ala. Did the masjid that was extended with mud bricks, etc., were there any windows? How would they pray at night? And were there carpets, or did they pray on the floor directly? The masjid that was extended with mud bricks, if you're referring to at the time of Rasulullah and Umar al-Khattab, as far as I know, I don't know of any windows, because they use like proper, the walls obviously. And in terms of windows, they had an open roof mostly. It was an open roof, so you could see everything. And remember, when it came to how did they know what time is salah, they had the mu'adhin. The mu'adhin is the one who goes up to a higher point and he sees everything, not everybody else. There were no carpets. We said كان فراشه الرمال. It was sand and little stones that would be the carpet. And that's why we take off our shoes. By the way, this is a point. The Sahaba used to pray with their shoes on. When they came to the Masjid of Rasulullah, they used to pray with their shoes on. Of course, today we take our shoes off not out of a religious reason. We do it out of practical reasons, because the carpets are going to get dirty and so on. So that's why we take our shoes off. Otherwise, praying with your shoes on is the asal, it is the default position. Yeah? It doesn't mean now brothers come in, like, I'm going to keep my shoes on. No, we got carpets. Let's be pragmatic. Yeah? And how did the mu'adhin knew at the time of salah? The alamat zahira, the signs of salah are very apparent. Yeah, we talked about them before. Al-Fajr, when the white line appears. Dhuhr, when the sun has just gone past its peak. Sheikh Salim, am I over time? Sorry, inshallah. And Al-Maghrib is when the sun goes down, and Isha when the red twilight disappears. One last, khalas, we'll finish there inshallah. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik, ashhadu an la ilaha illa ant, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk.